welcome to another episode of Read It with Whiskey. I am your host, Laurie Juntunen, and today we have a very special episode where I am interviewing Laurie Robinson. So I've known Laurie for quite a few years. She used to be a training client of mine back in Florida, and we developed a friendship, a relationship over time. And I'm so glad that we have been able to maintain that friendship, even though we live very, very far apart from each other. We have very, very different lives, but for some reason, we've just always clicked. It's always been really easy to talk with Laurie, and I'm just so fortunate to have her in my life. So today's episode, we will be talking about her brand new book, Gray Divorce, and I actually helped to edit and format this book for her. So I'm definitely well invested in this book, and I'm just so proud of her for all the work that she's done. We will get into more of the details on her book, but in essence, it's basically a how-to guide on how to overcome divorce after 25 plus years of marriage. It is a very inspiring story that Laurie has, and she is working towards helping people to overcome those obstacles that come up once you get divorced. All right, let's jump into the episode. Welcome to Read It with Whiskey, an interview podcast highlighting self-published authors. I am your host, Laurie Juntunen. The purpose behind this podcast is to help authors grow their audience while also introducing readers to their new favorite authors. Let's get to know the person behind the page. Sit back, sip some whiskey, and lean in to these self-published authors. Before we jump into the interview with Laurie, I want to give you guys a little Laura J Live update. So last week, I revealed the name of my upcoming fiction novel. I was so excited to reveal this to everybody because it was a long time coming. I had been contemplating a couple different names for the book, and I'm so excited with what I chose. So this is the first book in the sci-fi dystopian book series that I have titled the Shockwave series. So the Shockwave series is all about an electric pulse hitting the nation and basically wiping out all electronics. And the first book in this series is called Transient Pulse. So it's kind of the introduction to the larger story that's going to be developing throughout 3 books in the series. So Transient Pulse, it follows the story of Dixie, and in the very opening scenes, we find out that her husband has gone missing, and they had been planning to travel across the country to a safe zone. And Dixie has to decide, is she going to wait for her husband to show up and use the limited resources that they have, or is she going to leave him behind and start the journey on her own? So that's how it starts. I'm not giving you guys any more details, but it's called Transient Pulse, and it's really developed for a multitude of reasons. I'm not going to go into too many details here because I want to get into Laurie's episode, but I just wanted to let you guys know that the edits are still processing, and I am taking ARC readers, advanced reader copy participants, basically. So if you would like to read the book before it is published, hopefully publishing by the end of March, if you want to get your hands on a copy early, then you can email me, laura@laurajlive.com, and just request that you want to be an ARC reader. Fill out your information, let me know why you would be a good candidate, and I'll get back to you ASAP and let you know if you made the cut. I am taking limited amounts of ARC readers because I want to make sure it's a small niche of people who are really invested in helping me get this book out to the world and who are really invested in giving me an honest opinion and honest review on social media, on Amazon, on all of the different kind of platforms. So if you're interested, again, you can email me, laura@laurajlive.com, and Laura J Live is LauraJaylive. All right, let's get into the episode with Laurie. Hello, Laurie, and welcome to Read It with Whiskey. How are you today?
Hi, Laura. Thanks for having me.
I am so excited to have you on the show, and you're actually the first nonfiction author that I have on Read It with Whiskey, so I was really excited about that. And that being said, this is going to be a little bit different than our regular interview because fiction authors, they have a little bit more leeway on where they go with their book topics, all that kind of stuff. But you're a nonfiction author basing your book off of your life. So go ahead and tell our listeners, what is your new book about? Gray Divorce, From Devastation to Dating.
I am divorced after a 32-year marriage, and it took a lot of time and effort to heal from that pain. I ended up starting a Facebook group because there just wasn't enough support out there for people in my position. So I started Divorce After 25 plus years. And the response was amazing. I had 100 members in the first week, and I got 50 members in the second week. And now, almost 3 months later, I have 927 members. So there's truly a need for support for these people.
Yes, I absolutely love what you're doing with this group. Obviously, we've known each other for a few years. So when I heard that you had found kind of this niche, this group of people that you can help, I was really excited to hear that you had found a way to do that through this Facebook group. So tell us, what was the main motivation then to write this book because of this group?
I had to do a lot of research to answer the questions that these people were posting in the group. Hours and hours of research, trying to find answers for them. I decided that all this advice needed to be in one place, very concise and in order, so that people looking for the answers had one place to go. And I looked for other books that they just don't deal with the long-term marriages.
I agree. There's so much out there for newly divorced, but yeah, there wasn't anything out there for something long term. And so that's what the Facebook group is geared toward, is the 25 plus years of marriage ending in divorce. But as in this book, is this only for people who have gone 25 years, or would somebody find value in it who's only been married for 10 years and divorcing?
It's really geared towards the older person, but the lessons learned, I think, could help just about anyone.
When it came to this group, you said there was a lot of things that people were going through, and I'm sure you were repeating yourself a lot of times because the same questions kept coming up. So do you have any specific examples of things that were coming up a lot that you've included in the book?
I think the most common complaint is that they just don't know where to go from here. They don't know how to heal. They don't know how their life is going to be without their partner. These people have been married for most of their adult lives, 30 years, 40 years. And so they want to know, how do I change my life at this point in my life?
Right. It's hard to basically start over on your own versus having a partner in that process.
Right.
So what is your biggest advice when someone comes to you with that specific question?
You really need to look at yourself and who you are today. A lot of people have sacrificed themselves to raise a family and support. Usually it's a husband. So I guide them in learning who they are and what they enjoy doing so that they can focus on goals to help them get to a happier place in life.
Right. To give them that process. Kind of that I'm lost, I need direction. And so that's what you've been trying to provide.
Yes.
I actually have a very personal experience with this book because I'm helping you out with a little bit of editing and formatting. So I've already read through it multiple times. I can just say from my own perspective, I'm not married. I have never been married, but with reading everything that you've gone through after the fact, I know I can take this and use it in my relationships moving forward. So that was something that I definitely wanted to bring to your attention, is that I think everybody could learn something, even if they're not in the exact situation. There's a lot of value that you've provided in there.
Yes. The book helps you to really look at yourself, your actions and reactions to things that happen during a relationship. Not that you are to blame yourself. A lot of people will try to blame themselves, and it certainly is not your fault. Well, unless it is your fault. This book really comes from the perspective of the spouse that is left in the dust. So that being said, anyone who is in a relationship could also benefit from the exercises at looking at yourself and making your relationships better.
Is there one specific topic in the book that you think would be the first one to go to, or like one specific issue that is more of a bigger picture than like the small? There's a lot of exercises within the book, but if you had to choose one that you would say start there.
Oh, no, I would have to say start from the beginning.
Yeah, start from the beginning.
Read through it. If something doesn't pertain to you, read it anyway, because the book really follows a process from beginning to end. You can't really skip around in the chapters. Not that long of a book. You can read it.
And that's one thing that I noticed while I was going through. There's certain areas where somebody might have a bigger issue or a harder time progressing forward in certain sections, especially when you get to the 5 stages of grief that you talk about. Would you recommend reading through the entire thing or stopping when you're at a point where you have to figure something out and then moving on later?
I think that probably the best way to do it is to read through the healing process of the book, beginning to what I call the final step, and then go back through and do the exercises over and over again until you feel like you can move on. Get the whole picture first.
Yes, definitely. And I definitely advocate for that as well. In my own book, Happy List Choke List, it's the same kind of thing where you have to learn the whole overarching topic and concept, and then you can go back and work on those exercises. And then that repetitivity is definitely going to be beneficial going back into those exercises. And you include a lot of journaling questions where people can learn more about themselves in the process, because like I think we've talked about this before, where you might learn to be one person, but then once you're alone, you realize you might not be that same person. You have to learn who you are again. So I think those
Exactly.
journaling prompts definitely help with that.
Yes. Especially at this stage in your life. Your kids are grown, they're starting their own families. You're no longer needed as a mother or a father.
Hmm.
Your career is probably coming to an end in the next few years. So you're not going to be that business person anymore. It's the whole stage for a person in my age group. It's all about change. There's so much that you have to get used to, and to be put into a divorce situation on top of it is pretty scary.
And you mentioned that in your group, a lot of people have recurring dreams. Do you think that could be because of that fear?
My dreams in particular were not fear. They
Okay.
were always of our happier days. Back in our first house when my daughter was still in grade school, and everything was really good. And I would wake up so sad because it
Hmm.
just wasn't true. And recurring dreams, there's not a lot you can do about them except for a process called tapping
Okay.
and hypnosis, because you have to get into your subconscious. So in my group, we do that often. We have a tapping session on Monday. But in the book, I don't get into that.
Okay. Well, anybody who's interested in reading the book, hopefully they'll go into your Facebook group and learn more about that. So the tapping, I've heard of tapping. I've heard it work wonders. Is there anything else that could help someone go through a divorce, through this emotional warfare outside of the book that you could recommend along with the tapping?
Um, Therapy is
Yeah.
always helpful, but you've got to get a therapist that is skilled in this area. A lot of them are doing therapy on solution based, it's called, but they really have to understand what your problem is before they can come up with a solution for it.
So is that something you recommend in your Facebook group, along with obviously having the group is building a community of like-minded people who can understand you? So how does that play into it? Are a lot of people hesitant to go into therapy? What do you say when they're kind of on the fence?
I always suggest consulting a professional. I'm not a professional, I'm just somebody that's been there. There are some people that are really, especially the ones that are recently facing this situation, they're in a very, very dark place. And I do suggest that they see their doctor so that if they need medication, or their doctor can recommend therapy for them. Even go to your clergyman. Talking to a professional is always helpful. Now, that being said, it's very expensive too. So
Right.
you have to be prepared for that.
But mental health is definitely important, because if you're not doing okay, then you can't do good for other people at the same time.
Exactly.
So I really like that you're supporting that and helping people through this. And the community that you've put together is just incredible. I'm so excited to know how great it's been going and that it is still growing. How does it feel to now be an author? I mean, we've talked about it a little bit on one-on-one, but how does it feel to now know that your book is getting out to the world, is going to be able to help people?
When you sent me the final copy, I
Hmm.
felt like dancing. um, I was just so excited. And yet, even to this day, I'm still making little tweaks to it. So tomorrow's our deadline. I'm going to be done with it.
Yep.
But it felt really good. It was such an accomplishment.
Definitely. I think I was jumping for joy when when you had messaged me that it's finally finished. So exciting. So I'm definitely rooting for you and making sure that a lot of people can hear about this book, because I feel like you're going to help so many people with the content that you have. So is there anything that you want to share about how people can get more involved with your Facebook group, specifically how they can contact you there?
Sure. It's do a search for Divorce After 25 Plus Years, and it's a little plus sign. I can also be reached by email, Laurie Robinson, DMM, at Yahoo. Group has presentations every Sunday night. Once my book is out, I'll probably do a presentation myself, explaining the book and the processes and how to get it.
So every Sunday night in the Facebook group, you said?
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm really excited for people to be able to read your book and learn from your experience and hopefully heal through whatever they are currently going through. But with that being said, this would not be Read It with Whiskey without talking a little bit about whiskey. So what is your favorite whiskey?
I'm more of a bourbon person, so I like Jim Beam. And I say Jim Beam because I really don't have a lot of experience. I just like the taste of that one.
Yeah, I love it. All right. Well, you already told our audience where they can find you on Facebook and email. All right, Laurie. Well, I am so glad that you were able to make it on the show with me today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Laura. It was a lot of fun.
Speaking with Laurie is always such a treat, and I'm so glad that you guys got to get to know her a little bit through this interview. But I did want to give you a little bit more background so you can understand how we really know each other and more of the details that we talked about within the interview. So, like I had said in the beginning of this episode, I met Laurie through a gym that I was working at, and she was a personal training client. She ended up leaving the gym, and we hadn't talked for a little bit. And I left the gym. I was pursuing life coaching, and I don't even remember how it happened, but we came into contact with each other again. And she actually became part of my beta group for my book, Happy List Chokelist. I did mention the book in the interview while I was talking with her. And she was one of the women of the 18, I had about 18 or 20 women in the beta group for Happy List Chokelist, and she was one of those participants. So she went through the entire process with me and helped me basically to do the research for my book. It was a free beta group. They volunteered their time to learn the process with me, and I'm just so fortunate to have all of those women in the group because they really, really helped me to get that book published. So Laurie definitely had a deep dive into the process laid out in Happy List Chokelist, and that book is still available on Amazon if you're interested. It's Happy Lists, HAPPILESS, Chokelist, CHOKELIST. So Happy List Chokelist, it's kind of a play on the words happiness checklist, which a lot of people feel like they have to have this checklist of all the things that they have to do in their life in order to be happy. And this book was born out of the realization I had that I can create my own happiness. And so I developed these steps. I talk about it in the book. You can go ahead and read it. But basically, I developed these steps to break through barriers, gain clarity on what I truly wanted, and then move forward in life. And it was all to find true happiness. So that book came out in November 2019. And Laurie was a really big part of that. So that's one of the reasons why I think we kept in touch, because I really got to know her in depth throughout that entire process. Thank you so much for tuning in with Read It with Whiskey this week. And just a few announcements before you take off. If you haven't heard of the secret version of this podcast, I want you to go and visit Patreon. Patreon.com/readitwithwhiskey, and you can have access to the secret episodes that I give only to my patrons. I would love for your support and help in making sure this podcast can stay alive and running. And recently, I actually put out a few different episodes on Patreon, including my Books I Read series from 2020, kind of a summary of all the 2020 books I had read, and then the plan for 2021. I also just released an episode there about the book club launch, which is going to be launching in April 2021. So if you're interested in learning more information about that, you can snag that information right away on the Patreon site. Otherwise, that episode might be dropping here in our regular platforms. I'm still debating, but I want to give you that information. So keep your eyes out this weekend. You might be getting a surprise. And next week we are going to be talking with Cedric, and he is actually the first poetry book that I have on the podcast. So this week was the first nonfiction. Next week is the first poetry book. He is the first poet that I'm going to have on, and I do have someone else later on down the road who is also a poet, but he's the first that I'm going to have on the show. So definitely stay tuned. If you like poetry, you will really enjoy his book. All right, you guys, until next time.